Welcome to Outta the Cage, a show that is here to bridge the gap between conventional thinking and comprehensive thinking. Join me, Roy Thompson, as I share with you my health journey from dis-ease to abundant life. Together, we will use that journey as a launch pad to see how hope and freedom are in store for you when you begin to see things differently, rather than what is common, ordinary, and comfortable. Real change can happen. It's time to break out of the cage. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Outta the Cage. I'm your host, Roy Thompson. I am so excited to finally have this podcast up and going. It has been a joy looking forward to it and planning it, but it has been a long time in the making, and I can't help but just feel giddy inside because I am loving the chance to get to share my story, my journey, in hopes that it will impact you in a positive way and hopefully bring you some hope and freedom in your life. And I believe that starts by seeing things a little differently. I'll get into my journey and kind of tell you how that all began for me. Just to give you a little bit of background on myself, I'm in my mid-30s. I have a wife named Meredith and 3 kids, one girl named India who's 7, and twins that are 5 years old, and their names are Hyde and Mesa. They are a joy. They are what I call my spark plugs. And I just am so excited to be at this point of where we can, just get this message out. And it's a health podcast. It's a regenerative agriculture podcast. It's more than anything, it's seeing things differently. That's what it's about. Is a friend of mine, a mentor of mine, Gabe Brown, says that if you want to make small changes, change the way you do things. If you want to make big changes, change the way you see things. And that's kind of at the core of my journey. It took a little while for me to see things differently, but we'll get into that. I want to take a few episodes and go through my journey, what it was all like, maybe in a little more detail, and I hope it resonates with some of you. But I am now 36 years old. My journey started when I was 19. I was going to tech school and in eastern South Dakota. I was going for diesel mechanics, and I just really always enjoyed working with my hands, staying active. I enjoyed exercising. I'd gone to high school in Selby area high school, and I graduated there in 2005. Went to Lake Area Tech for diesel mechanics and graduated in 2007. And that is where I fell in love with my wife, now of 15 years, going on 16, almost 16, my wife Meredith. And, while I was there, my wife and I actually met at a rodeo Bible camp the year before. And she was actually she was a counselor. I was a contestant. She was pinning my number on the back of my shirt. And I never would have thought that a couple years later we'd be married. In fact, I assumed she was already taken, and I didn't see a ring on the lockdown one at the time, but I was sure she already was taken, and so I didn't even pursue it until I met her again when I was going to tech school in Watertown later that fall, and it just I'd met her and her brothers there. But I didn't really put 2 and 2 together that where I was going to tech school is right near where they were from. And we met there at a Bible study and got to know her brothers. And then I got to know her. And long story short, my brother and myself both married sisters. So she had one sister. She married my older brother, and I married Meredith. So we now have 3 kids, one 7-year-old girl named India and 2 5-year-old twins. And they're 5 years old, Hyde and Mesa. And it is a very busy but a wonderful time of life. And I couldn't be more excited to have them along on my journey as well, on our journey as we navigate life together and whatever God has in store for us. So I graduated Lake Area Tech in 2007, but not before I started getting sick. In the spring of 2007, it was about March, I believe, I got real sick with just a common cold, and it just kind of pulled me down a little bit. I thought it was just a bad cold. I came home, and I got a over-the-counter Z-Pack from my local doctor. And, those symptoms went away. I got to feeling pretty good for the most part. And I just didn't think much of it. I went back to school. I was healthier. It seemed like everything was fairly cleared up. So about a month later in April, I started getting those same cold symptoms. This time it was a little worse. So I came back home over the weekend, got an over-the-counter Z-Pack, and went on with life. Got to feeling better again. By May, figured third time's a charm. I got sick again. But this time it didn't really go away. I got the Z-Pack. I went through it, and things really didn't improve much. And I just noticed I was starting to lose weight. I was starting to take more trips to the bathroom. I noticed some abdominal pain and just really didn't think that it was anything to worry about. I mean, at that stage of my life, if you'd have told me that I'd care about health and nutrition at this point, I would have laughed at you because nothing was further from my mind. I thought Mountain Dew was good because it had a natural ingredient, which I thought at the time was natural. It had the word corn in it and syrup. I know where syrup comes from and I know where corn comes from. And that was literally the extent of my nutrition that I knew of what I knew about nutrition at the time. So in June, I began losing weight and just didn't have much energy at all. Noticed that things probably weren't right, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want to alarm my mom or anything like that. And about the next month, early July, my girlfriend at the time, Meredith, now my wife, asked me, "So have you been losing weight?" And I didn't like hearing that. I always enjoyed being active and tried to be fit, tried to stay active and exercise, work out. And I wanted to be the buff football player or whatever. And I knew I was losing weight. I just didn't want to admit it. And as I thought about it, I said, well, it's just the summertime. I'm sweating more. We're building fence and a lot more exercise, and I'm just sweating everything off. But I knew it was more than that because my pants weren't fitting right, and I was just constantly losing this weight, and I knew I didn't feel right. So in July, I finally decided I better tell my mom about this. So I did. And right away, she got the doctor's appointment scheduled, and they wanted to do a colonoscopy right away. And they diagnosed right off the bat with Epstein-Barr virus, similar to mono, Clostridium difficile, which is an intestinal infection. And they noticed I had very high liver enzyme numbers, which they thought was just brought on by the Epstein-Barr and elevated because of that virus. So it didn't alarm them much at that point. So they began treating the Clostridium with specific antibiotics and anti-inflammatories. And I started having symptoms that really seemed a little bit more like spinal meningitis, that just, I felt so stiff. I couldn't get off the couch, and I got these migraine headaches. It was awful. I felt like I'd been through this intense full body workout for days on end, and yet I hadn't even been off the couch for very long and would feel exhausted. So they took me to the hospital. They did a spinal tap to rule out spinal meningitis. And thankfully, those results were negative. And they found that the spinal meningitis symptoms were caused from the medication I was on. And all the different meds together kind of created this inflammation and this stiffness in my joints and muscles. And this doctoring went on for probably a solid month, I'd say. And I just remember my doctors just sitting there and saying, we honestly don't know what you have, but I'm happy to write a recommendation for Mayo. The colonoscopy I'd had earlier was inconclusive. They had sent the results back to Mayo, and Mayo said the same thing. They're inconclusive. And so with that, we just kind of put in our our scheduled Mayo, but it was 2 months away. Our doctors gave us a recommendation and got us up a little ways, but we were still for 2 months out. And I was really not doing well. I was losing weight fast. I was having more and more migraines and just not being able to have any energy to really do much of anything. And so my mom was calling Mayo Clinic every day, seeing if there's any cancellations. And I was on my back for 3 weeks probably, just other than when I'd have to run to the bathroom for 20-some times plus a day. And I was keeping a food diary. I was trying to figure out what it was that was causing it. and I just couldn't make any headway. Everything felt miserable, and we just kept praying for cancellation. And over those 3 weeks was really interesting because I felt like laying on the couch and just really all I had time to do was read my Bible and watch movies. And so I felt like every week I felt like God was showing me something specific that I needed to work on in my life and make right with him and make right with other people. And so I started doing that. And every week I felt like we had a new milestone that we had reached in my health. And after about 3 weeks of this happening, I felt like the Lord kind of opened a door for me to get in the Mayo Clinic. And with that, I was so thrilled because we did have a cancellation. Prayers were answered. Got in a month and a half sooner than I expected. Got a wonderful doctor. She's just been such a blessing to me through the years. And they found out that this Clostridium difficile was still very active. The meds that I'd been on did nothing but just make it angry. So it was alive and well in my intestines and really wreaking havoc. They put me on a very specific antibiotic called vancomycin, and got me another colonoscopy and this one they looked into my small intestine to see that the abrasions were consistent with Crohn's disease. And that is what they diagnosed it as and got me on a very specific IV called Remicade for the therapy to treat this autoimmune disease. And the Remicade treatment I was getting every 8 weeks. It was about $9,000 every treatment. And she told me right off the bat, this is going to be effective for about 10 years, and then your body's going to build an immunity to it. And with that, I was like, okay, well, she said, we just want you to have quality of life. It's not healing anything. She was very clear with me on that. And so I said, okay, well, sounds good. And with that, we kind of started our slow uphill climb back to health, I guess you'd say. And so for those of you that may not know, Crohn's is an autoimmune disease where chronic inflammation in the small intestine and colon cause long-lasting diarrhea, exhaustion, fever, cramping, and bleeding. WebMD says there's no cure for Crohn's, but only steroids, immunosuppressants to treat the symptoms in hopes to give better quality of life. So I did well on the IV, and I did well on it. My body handled it well. Some people can't. It's immunosuppressant, so some people's body kind of reacts differently to it. And for me, it worked really good, and I was thankful for that. They also put me on a prednisone. I was going, I asked her when I was at Mayo, I said, so can I get married, in a couple months? Because I'd proposed to Meredith on the way, like a couple days before I left for Mayo. And she sat there and she sat back in her chair and thought, well, maybe, yes, you can. We'll have you feeling good by then. And so with that, we left and I was excited. And shortly before our wedding, I started getting some symptoms that felt like the Crohn's was becoming more and more active. And so she put me on prednisone during the wedding and everything. And there was kind of a miscommunication with my doctor, my local doctor, and my Mayo doctor. He understood I was supposed to be on it at a low dose and just stay on it. Well, when I went back the following year for a checkup, she seen I was still on prednisone, and she was not thrilled with that. So she got me on a very specific taper. It took 6 months to taper off of it because your body builds or creates its own 10 milligrams of its own prednisone from your adrenal glands every day. And once it has high doses of prednisone, it kind of it gets lazy and quits making its own. And so if you cut off cold turkey, your body doesn't respond with making your prednisone right away. So you have to taper off so your body hopefully starts building its own again. And that's kind of how I understand it anyway. And so in the fall of 2008, after coming off that prednisone and feeling pretty good on the IV, my doctors realized that my liver enzymes never came back down after getting rid of the Epstein-Barr virus. And I was feeling so much better, but yet my liver enzymes were still quite elevated. And so I went back to Mayo, and they wanted to do some more digging into what could be causing my liver enzymes to be elevated. And with that, they diagnosed PSC, primary sclerosing cholangitis. They looked at it through an MRI, and they were going to do some liver biopsies, and thankfully they were able to just see it through an MRI. And basically it's inflammation of the liver where scar tissue builds on your bile ducts, and the bile can't flow properly out of the bile duct and be excreted through your intestines. So it builds up and starts being absorbed into your tissue and your bloodstream, and carried on through your bloodstream and absorbed in your tissues. My eyes were starting to yellow. I felt like I felt real miserable. I kind of had this headache over the top of my head that made me feel like I had a soft skull, all these different things. And when they diagnosed it as PSC, they said it was, just something that's a relatively new disease. There's no treatment for it at the time. And with that, they basically said the best advice we can give you is just don't Google life expectancy. And so with that, we went home and Googled life expectancy. And that was, we did it just probably because we were told not to. But anyway, we had a lot of ups and downs through the next couple of years and staying consistent with the IV. But about 2012, my liver enzymes really skyrocketed, and I felt as sick as I've ever felt in my life. Those headaches over the top of my head came back. I felt underneath my right ribs. If I felt real stressed out, I'd feel this fluttering, I guess is how I explain it. Felt like if I touched it, I could feel it on my hand. It was just felt like a throbbing kind of in my liver, I guess. And I felt awful. My eyes were yellowing once again. And at that time, I went in and had my labs done, and my AST came back, liver enzyme came back at 391. It's supposed to be under 37. My ALT was 711. That's supposed to be under 78. My ALK Phos was supposed to be under 136, but it was 454. And my total bilirubin was 2.3. That's the amount of bile in your blood. And it was supposed to be 0.0 to 1. And so my doctor got back to me and said, we need you here now if you can, and we will get your annual checkup for your Crohn's taken care of, and we really hope we can help you with your liver. And they did a procedure called an ERCP. It's a very long word, string of words there, so I just use the acronym. But it's where they take a camera and a CAT scan machine. They put the CAT scan machine over, from your liver up, and then they went down my throat with a scope and went in and actually brushed open my bile ducts. And it was a huge success. I remember in the report it said that the bile just flowed out, poured out, and I felt like a different person when I came out of anesthetic. My doctor also doubled my Remicade at that meeting, at that appointment, and upped the frequency from 8 weeks to 6 weeks. And so now this all of a sudden cost $18,000 per treatment every 6 weeks. And obviously I couldn't have done that without health insurance at the time, which will be significant later on as I talk about kind of our financial journey with everything as well in future episodes to come. But so it was $18,000 treatment, and the insurance was expensive, but at least I knew I needed it, and I was so thankful for it. And but I noticed some key things when I got sick with my liver pulling me down so bad. Really, what it boils down to, I realized that food matters and stress is no good. That's basically what I learned in a nutshell. But I noticed that when I would eat certain things, when I was so pulled down, I felt a slight uptick or being pulled down in my system. It doesn't matter if it was a piece of bread, doesn't matter if it was something like a piece of chicken or whatever it was. I could feel immediately how my body was affected, because I think when we are healthy and we're thriving, we're doing well, our baseline of health is up here. We don't feel all of the effects of everything you eat. You don't necessarily feel the effects of stress as much. You're healthy and you're doing well, and it's a little bit tougher to notice all those little blips, I guess you'd say. And so for me, but being pulled down, my baseline of health was so low, I felt every little bump in the road, and I felt every little rise anytime it was good. And I was also buying a combine at the time because we had just started farming, and I really needed to get my equipment for, the livelihood we're now doing. This farming thing was new to me, so I was buying equipment. I was borrowing money for it, and it stressed me out a little bit because I owed money on cattle. I owed money on an operating loan. I owed money on land, and I was buying equipment. And so it was a lot of debt. It was a little bit stressful. And every time I get on the computer to look at these combines for sale, and I didn't buy a new one, I bought a used one, I'd be looking, and all of a sudden I'd feel my liver start fluttering. I'd feel a little sick over my head, top of my head. And this was before I had my procedure. And so I realized that, boy, food must really matter, and stress really affects the body. So this was a light bulb moment for me. I was like, boy, a lot of you are probably thinking, duh, we all know that. But I didn't know anything about that before this happened, and I was experiencing it firsthand. And we had hunters come that fall, and they knew I'd been really sick. And they said, this one hunter said, my wife told me to give you this book. I don't know if it's any good or not, but whatever. She's got an autoimmune disease too. And she thinks it's good, so better read it. So I took it, and it was called The Maker's Diet by Jordan Rubin. And I was just thinking, maybe I'll get to looking into it sometime, but I don't know. I'm not, what you might notice is if you get sick or diagnosed with something, you might have a whole flood of people telling you what you need to do to get better. And I'd kind of had that. I'd had a lot of people tell me, well, you should do this, you should do that. And I just wanted to follow the doctor's orders, and that was that. And so later on, though, after my liver procedure, I got to thinking about that book, and I started opening it up. When I realized that food does matter, stress is no good, I got to reading about it, and I was so intrigued by all these diseases that Jordan Rubin had, and yet he got back to a biblical way of eating, and really, I don't know if you call it a strict diet. It is a strict diet, but it really, once your body gets used to such healthy, nutrient-dense food, you want to eat that way. And so I read his book, and I got on his newsletter, and one day he endorsed a guy on there that had an interesting high-intensity interval training series called Burst Fit, and that introduced me to Dr. Josh Axe from draxe.com. And I was like, oh, this guy looks interesting. So I got to reading all his health articles. And as I dug into kind of Jordan Rubin in the book, I also went through a health coaching program that Jordan Rubin put on. And I wanted to learn everything I could about nutrition and healthy living. And I couldn't get enough. It was like drinking water through a fire hose. And I just wanted as much content as I could possibly get. I was just like a sponge. I was wanting to absorb everything because it made sense to me. It made so much sense as he was talking about where our food is at now, where it should be as far as nutrient density, the stuff we're putting in our bodies and how it can be driving the disease. And it made so much sense. I was so thrilled to really believe in my mind that, you know what, maybe I can get better. Maybe this is going to make a difference. And so as I learned about Dr. Axe, his website was chock full of health articles. And as I dug into those, I just couldn't quit reading those, and got on his probiotics and all the things. And I couldn't believe it until one day as we went down this path, Meredith and I kept changing our diets as we'd learn more. We'd buy the healthier fats. I started cutting out certain things, and it's really funny. I should back up real quick. The first thing I changed to healthier living was I exchanged normal Mountain Dew for the throwback Mountain Dew, which it still has the dyes, it still has brominated vegetable oil, all the nasty stuff, still has a lot of sugar, but it's real sugar. And when I say that in a public speaking engagement or something, everybody usually laughs because they're like, that's not much of a health change. But it really was, because it gets that flywheel spinning, it gets that ball rolling. And once that momentum's going, you just start making bigger and bigger changes. And so I went from changing the pop I drank to going to throwback. And then before long, I was like, you know what? I don't need pop. I'm going to get one of those Starbucks Frappuccinos that doesn't have dyes in it. It still has 48 grams of sugars in it or whatever, but I'm going to go with those at the gas station instead. And so I would get those. And then after that, I was like, I don't even need these anymore. I'm going to go with tea, I guess it was, or unsweetened tea. So I went with tea a while, and then now they have probiotic drinks, probiotic pops. They have they even have kombucha in gas stations now. So now I always get the kombucha if they have it. But anyway, it's funny because that's the first change I made. And when I start telling people, if people say, like early on, after my health transformation, people would say, well, what can I do to change my diet? And so I would go through the whole thing that I do or did and do every year. And you could just see their eyes get tired. They lose interest super fast. And they're like, I don't know if I can do that. So I realized it was being a bit overwhelming. So I'm not quite so intense with it now as far as when I explain it to people. So I just tell them, you know what? First thing I changed was very simple. And now I lay out a few things for them, but I try to keep it a lot more simple. And I would just want to encourage people that the first change I made was literally the Mountain Dew I was drinking. And that change led to bigger and bigger changes. So once you get the momentum going, it's awful hard to stop a freight train when you're making these changes and your body's loving it. You just kind of want to keep making those changes. So the lights really came on during that liver procedure I had, and when I was so sick, and I could literally I felt every blip, like I say, and I felt every positive thing. If I ate something that made me feel good, I just thought, wow, well, now what would it look like if I focused in on the things that made me feel good? This sounds so stupid, but if I focused on the things that made me feel good and cut out the things that made me feel bad. This is how simple my mind was in just starting to go down this path. And so that's what I did. And as I got to learn more and more about nutrient density, I was like, okay, these things that made me feel better, what if I got a healthier, more nutrient dense version of that thing and kept putting that in my body? Well, meanwhile, keeping on cutting out the things that have no nutritional value or anything. And so I just thought that was a funny place to start looking back. So I got to thinking about this, and as I kept making these other changes and everything, I just got to thinking, these lights keep coming on that I'm learning more and more. I keep wanting to learn more and more. I need to dive in more. And then that was about the day that I seen a YouTube video, and it changed my life. Now, I'd been on Jordan Rubin's newsletter, and I started following Josh Axe because of all those health articles that I was talking about. Well, one day he came out with a YouTube video that said, today I'm going to answer for you what is at the very root of all autoimmune disease. And I thought, I've been reading about this long enough. I know sugar's driving the inflammation. Inflammation's at the root of all disease. And yep, I know that, but I kept listening anyway. And he got to the end of the video, and he said, about the middle of the video, and he said, it's toxicity. At the very root of the inflammation is toxicity. Toxicity in our food, water, air, medications, dental fillings, etc. You name it, we're surrounded by toxins. And these toxins build up over time, and they slowly degrade our bodies until it becomes a problem. And then the symptoms kind of come up. And so basically he laid out how we rid our bodies of these toxins and begin the healing. And he was selling a product. It was called The Secret Detox at the time. And I don't believe he still sells it. I don't think he offers it anymore. It may be his leaky gut protocol now. But I bought the detox, and they sent me a big 3-ring binder that had a lot of information on why you're doing each step and what it's doing for your body. And then it laid out even a grocery list. I mean, it had everything there. And as I kept reading through it, it just made more and more sense. As I kept learning, all this stuff made sense to me. And so I just kept thinking, how could I do this? How could I implement this? What would it look like? And meanwhile, we're raising cattle and we're farming, but yet I couldn't eat any of the food I was producing. The cattle had implants, synthetic hormones in them at the time. I couldn't eat that meat. I was learning about grass-fed beef and why I need to have wild-caught salmon instead of farmed fish and all these different things. I was learning about fats and why I needed to get rid of any fake fats or anything like that and just focus on easily digestible, nutrient-dense fats like raw butter, coconut oil, and avocado oil, a lot of things like that, olive oil. And it was just even ghee. I was on ghee for a long time, and that clarified butter that has the casein taken out. It was incredible just learning. And I'd keep changing our diets, and Meredith would keep changing what she was making, and we would kind of rid our pantry of certain things when we'd find out how bad they were and why they were bad. And we'd put in nutrient-dense stuff, most of which we had to order online at the time. And I was ordering beef. Meanwhile, I'm raising beef. And that just seems so backwards to me. But I'll get into that a little later, perhaps another episode. And so I was completely sold. And I was so excited to take my next step towards healing. But at the same time, I think it's so awesome because it's totally God's timing, because my body was becoming more and more immune to the meds I was on. And so I was having more and more Crohn's symptoms. Meanwhile, I was feeling better, but yet my digestion wasn't getting better. And I would take this IV, and it would only last for about half of the amount of time as it should. So a few weeks, I'd be ready for another IV, but yet I was already at my max dose. And so this has been 8 years I'd been on the medication at that time. So I thought maybe I'm getting immune to it already. So with that, I emailed my doctor, and I told her how the IV was losing its efficacy. I was becoming more and more sick, and it was just my liver enzymes were beginning to climb again. They were beginning to elevate, and she wanted me to get my next scheduled treatment, and then she said, wait 4 weeks, and we'll do the antibody test, and we'll see if your body truly does have this immunity built up, but we have to measure it against a brand new IV. We have to track that. So I said, okay, we'll do that. So I scheduled the next one, and I thought to myself, boy, 4 weeks. Let's see. So that's 28 days. Well, the secret detox was a 28-day detox. And so the old wheels got to turning. I was like, well, 28 days of detoxing and 28 days before my antibody test. I know I'm going to have all these labs. I believe in what's going on here. I just knew it was going to be my last IV. And I remember pulling my phone out. I had the 3-ring binder of reading about my detox open on my arm. And I had my IV all taped up on my arm. And I thought about taking the picture because I knew it was my last IV. And to this day, I kick myself that I didn't, because I felt like it was too presumptuous. I wish I would have taken that step of faith, because it'd be a great picture to have right now. But I did the 28-day detox, and I was so excited to see what the labs looked like. I was feeling better. I knew that things were happening in my body. I could feel my body becoming calm on the inside. It was super enjoyable to feel my body changing as far as the inflammation leaving, and it just felt so good. And meanwhile, what the detox looked like, it was 28 days. It was 8 ounces of bone broth upon waking. Bone broth is something I could talk about for hours. It's easily digestible. It's packed with amino acids. I'll talk more about it a little later. But 20 ounces of juice veggies mid-morning. The Budwig protocol at noon. It's kind of like the advanced Budwig protocol. So it's 8 ounces of A2 kefir yogurt, 2 tablespoons flax oil, 2 tablespoons coconut oil, 4 tablespoons soaked chia seeds, and cinnamon. And I didn't love the flavor because the flax oil kind of made it a little yuck. And so I would just down it right away. But it was like a battery charger to your cells. I felt amazing after it. Just felt this amazing energy rise and just a calm brought to my system. And mid-afternoon, I'd have a salad with grass-fed protein, and supper was a feast. I felt like usually grass-fed or wild-caught protein, steamed veggies, maybe a little bit of salad there, chalked with olive oil and healthy fats. And it was just really eliminated all grains for the most part, and anything as far as added carbs. The most carbs I had were some berries throughout this 28 days, and just felt amazing. I felt healthier than ever. I was more vibrant than ever, more energy than I'd ever remembered having. I went for my 4-week blood test to check the antibodies and check the elevated liver enzymes. So the email from my doctor was something like this. My doctor said, Roy, your most recent blood work is absolutely normal. Good job at whatever you're doing and keeping yourself healthy. And she is always a lady of few words, so I didn't want to push it. And so I said, wow, that's wonderful news. So when do we hear about that antibody test? And later that afternoon, she got back and said, well, Roy, the test just came through. You had a very low level of Remicade in your system and a high antibody level. So we must get your IVs on time and be sure it's at its highest dose. I gave her the dosage I was getting, which was the highest I could, and told her about the detox that I'd done. I was leery to tell her beforehand because I didn't want anybody telling me not to, and I didn't want anybody telling me they didn't think it'd work. And so I wanted the results to speak for themselves. And so I told her about the detox in detail, and I asked if she would support me in going off the Remicade on a 6-month trial. She said, I would like you to continue your diet and the meds and said, I can't have to believe that these meds are doing at least something. And I said, with all due respect, I feel, and I'm very nervous in sending this email, with all due respect, I feel like I've detoxed out the meds and my body has built up the immunity. And since I'm doing so well and such little medicine in my bloodstream, would you please consider supporting me on a 6-month trial run without the meds? In which she responded, I'm very afraid of doing this, but this is not a dictatorship. This is a partnership. So if you're okay with the risk of having a flare-up and being a long ways from Mayo, I'm okay with it too. Oh, and with that, I was dancing. I was so excited. And since that conversation, I'm still off medication. Let's see, this is 7 years later. No flare-ups or Crohn symptoms. I continued my annual Mayo checkup and colonoscopies every year. For years, I haven't been back now for 3 years now, 4 years now. But I continued them for a while. In the first year, I went back for a colonoscopy, and it showed no active disease and no inflammation. She was very excited with what my body looked like and how the intestines had looked like everything was in remission and doing well. The second year I went, the surgeon that did the colonoscopy actually had to page my doctor because he said, I'm afraid we may have gotten a little mix up here. Is this the patient we're supposed to have? Because I can't find any disease whatsoever. I can't find scarring. I can't find any disease even in remission. It just looks like a totally healthy colon. And she said she couldn't be happier. She showed me the pictures. She said, whatever you're doing, keep it up. We visited. We had a great time visiting with her, and we're good friends with her. We stay in touch through email here and there, but always enjoyed going back to see her and her team. And the following couple years were good as well. There have been times that some inflammation has showed up, but never any symptoms, and it really has stayed doing really well. Now I haven't gone back, like I said, for a few years, but Hippocrates said that the greatest medicine of all is teaching people how not to need it. And what I've found in my life is that it's extremely hard to find people who are balanced in life in these two ditches. You either have somebody in the pro-medicine ditch that wants to get a flu shot as soon as the new one comes out, and they want to go get an antibiotic for a sniffle. Meanwhile, you have people in the health and wellness field that want to heal a broken arm with an essential oil. And I really desire to be balanced in the middle of the road. I would definitely lean more towards the functional medicine side whenever possible, but I do understand that there are some benefits to medicine as well and functional conventional medicine. But by and large, I think we are over-medicated, and by and large, I think that the functional side of the ditch is where I would find myself more, but I also enjoy conversations with people on the other ditch because I feel like we need to find some common ground. When I got done with my liver disease, or my liver procedure back in 2012, that was the last time I took an antibiotic, and I took it with high-dose probiotics along with it, and I decided I was going to be done with antibiotics, Lord willing, done with antibiotics. I know things can happen where, if you have bad pneumonia, I would probably say you should get an antibiotic and then work at healing your gut and taking care of yourself afterwards once you're healthy. But yet at the same time, I think there are so many things we can do in a functional way to combat the disease, whether it's diabetes or whether it's cold and flu or whatever it is. I think healthy lifestyle choices are the first step that should be taken. And I think medicine is a blessing to have for those situations when we do need them. But and I want to carry on conversations on this podcast with both ditches, and just kind of maybe challenge each other to look at how we see things and find some common ground in how we view health and wellness. So oftentimes I tell people, if you want to start in your health transformation, where do you begin that? And like I told you, I started with the Mountain Dew I had. And I would say the three main things we changed was water, protein, and fats. And ultimately begin with what you consume the most of and make that thing the healthiest version and change that. Make that your first change. And whatever it is that you enjoy the most, whether it's a sweet or something like that, make the healthiest version of that or find it somewhere. And once you have that, just don't overindulge and make it nutrient dense. And as momentum is built, keep making those changes in your lifestyle. What's the next thing that you consume the most of? And until you've reached your health goals, keep making those positive changes moving forward. Make it a lifestyle. Don't do, I feel like I talk to a lot of people that say, well, I did gluten-free for a couple of weeks and just didn't see any difference. And I did something for a whole month and it didn't really change anything. And whatever it might be, I would be leery with fad diets and different things that just focus on like just taking gluten out. A lot of gluten-free things are void of nutrients as well. So I would focus on the nutrient density of what it is you're consuming and really, like I said, make these changes a lifestyle. Don't just change for a little while. Every 3 months, our cells are renewing. We're having new cells built every day, but at the end of the 3 months is when about 90 days, all the cells in your body are remade. And so if you carry on this lifestyle for 3 months and you're seeing these positive changes, and you keep doing it, you stay consistent, you stay disciplined, after 3 months, those cells are going to be healthier and those cells are going to just keep getting better and better. And so that's why I say make it a lifestyle. And like I said, we started with 3 top things: the water we drink, the protein we were eating, and the fats we were consuming. And I'm going to dive into more of those, of what we changed, the transformation we experienced, and what it looks like now on every day, what we eat. And I'm completely Crohn's free, liver disease free. My liver enzymes have remained completely normal for the last, 11 years now. So, well, not 11 years. No, that was when I had my procedure. So I would say from 2016 till now. And 7 years ago. And it's been completely normal ever since. So I thank you so much for listening to this first episode of Out of the Cage. And I hope you are intrigued by it. I hope it connects with you in some way. And I look forward to explaining a little more what we changed, how we changed. And even in the next episode, I'll explain how that started changing our livelihood, even in the work we were doing. And with that, I look forward to talking to you soon. Well, that wraps up another episode of Out of the Cage. Thanks for sticking around. I hope this episode has opened your eyes to the world of possibilities that are in store for you when you begin seeing things differently. If you enjoyed what you heard today, Would you mind running over to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe, and also rate us so that we can impact more people? If you think of someone that could benefit from listening to this episode, please share it with them. You can also check out the website at outofthecagepodcast.com. There you will see all of our episodes as well as sign up for my newsletter. I'm looking forward to next time. Until then, stay curious and keep pressing ahead.